Happy Wednesday, Seattle hockey fans. We are 1 month through the season, not quite at 10 points yet, but there are definitely some things that we learned about the Seattle Kraken. Let's talk about those, get you ready for the upcoming games early in November. All that and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken. I am your host, Erica L. Ayala. Locked On Kraken, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by Sleeper. You can download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. We'll talk more about Sleeper, but I don't want you to sleep on season 3 of the Seattle Kraken. A little bit of a tough go early on. We've talked about how this is a disappointed team, but we are not downtrodden. We are not down and out. And so I want to talk about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about player safety. Coming from the women's hockey side of things, international hockey, there are just some things that happen in, quite honestly, boys and men's hockey that make no sense to me. And if you are part of the Locked On Kraken Insiders, I sent you an article by Jeff Baker. He has 2 different articles that I think are really interesting, talking about some of the player safety issues, particularly neck protection, given a recent death in the greater hockey community. And Jeff Baker was able to catch up with a few players and Dave Haxtell as well on the matter. And I'll play you the clip from Dave Haxtell. But let's talk about this first segment. New month, new Seattle Kraken? Well, we're hoping so. I talked on yesterday's episode about some of the things that I think are just a little inconsistent. I mean, we've been talking about it all season, really. But there are a few things that I think the Seattle Kraken, if we really do want to turn a page in November and make this a thankful November, full of Thanksgiving, if you will, for us as Seattle Kraken fans, there are a few things that I want us to focus on. Probably comes as no surprise, but one of the things is to put together a complete game. Particularly, I want the Seattle Kraken to be able to finish as strong as they start. We talked on yesterday's episode how they gave up 13 shots on goal in the third period to the Tampa Bay Lightning in that OT game winner. But they only had 5 shots. We heard from Jared McCann yesterday, and he talked about that this is a team that has to learn how to play with a lead. He talked about making sure that they're not taking their foot off the gas offensively, in particular when they have a lead. And that effectively is the name of the game for the Seattle Kraken. During the road stretch, 7 of our first 10 games have been on the road, and we've seen a decent amount of games go into overtime. We've also seen the Seattle Kraken blow a decent amount of leads in those times. So it's one thing to crawl back and play in overtime. It's another for the other team to force overtime. Now, we talked about it yesterday and days before. The Seattle Kraken players and Dave Haxtell right there with them, they're not concerned per se with how they're playing because they feel that all of the elements are there. They have all of the elements to the recipe. It's just a matter of how closely they're cooking, if you will, to just extend the metaphor, how closely they're cooking to the recipe. Are they skipping steps? Are they adding embellishments that don't quite make the recipe and the dish sing the way we want it to. Those are things that you're going to expect from a team early on. And yes, there are a handful of returning players. We love that we have some returning players for the Seattle Kraken, but we also know that there are a decent amount of new players to the roster. And, you got to build that chemistry. And so the Seattle Kraken are still focusing on that a little bit. So finish how we start is what I would love to see. I think also the Seattle Kraken have to do better with exits. I do not think that we have been doing a great job, especially when the other team comes with a decent amount of offensive pressure, in clearing the puck across the blue line, not just on the penalty kill, which has been one of the bright spots for the Seattle Kraken, but overall getting hemmed into the zone. We're seeing, I talked about puck retrievals, which I loved in the Tampa Bay game, especially early in the game. But other teams are able to do that to the Seattle Kraken more than the Kraken are able to do it to their opponent. So what are we talking about when it's cycling, puck retrieval, etc.? In basketball, we would call these second chance opportunities. The Seattle Kraken, over time, deeper into the season, have gotten better at giving themselves second opportunities, third opportunities, etc., etc., etc. You don't want just one and dones when you're in your offensive zone. Breakaways can be one and done, but even on breakaways, if you see one of your players on a breakaway haul buns to be able to retrieve the puck on a rebound, on a missed shot, whatever the case is. That's exactly how Brian Dumoulin scored his first goal. Now, things that I've liked, I think that stick positioning, generally speaking, especially when checking, back checking, forechecking, has been something that the Seattle Kraken have done with more consistency than I personally have ever seen. I'm going to take you to an article later in the show from the amazing Allison Lucan, and she talks about who is she talking about? Devin Shore, and how he got his first goal for the Seattle Kraken. And you see Oliver Bjorkstrand, Devin Shore, just great stick maneuvering and management there, not only on the back check, but Devin Shore to bring that puck down, corral it, and then on a breakaway score. So the skill we're starting to see a little bit more, but putting it all together is always what I'm looking for. And then on the defensive side, I think it kind of goes to what I was saying with exits. The Seattle Kraken, better but not great positioning in my estimation. But I haven't seen things that I want to belabor. I do want to say defensively, Jamie Alexiak looking solid. Will Borgen, fantastic. Vince Dunn, who we'll talk about a little bit today and definitely tomorrow on a Squadcast or Squidcast episode, has been really solid. And there are some things defensively on the defensive side of his defensive game that we've talked about on the show he wants to clean up and that I think he still has to work on. But Vince Dunn has been pretty solid for us when it does come to some of the players on the team that are able to effectively move the puck. We talk about that a lot when it comes to Joey Decord in net and how he kind of can eliminate additional passes. Breakouts, connecting on passes. In glimpses, we've seen really great work by the Seattle Kraken, effectively in transition. That's some of our strongest game in transition. But just to close the loop here, I do think we need to be a little stronger on the puck. So those are some of the things that if we're going into a new month, which we are, happy November, everyone. We're in a new month. We're going to get a reset at Climate Pledge Arena. And we're getting a bobblehead tomorrow. Hey, what do you say? I'm so jealous. If anyone has an extra bobblehead that they want to send my way, no pressure. I'm just saying I will gladly take it off of your hands. You just let me know. Name your price. But I'm pretty excited for the bobblehead for tomorrow's game. We'll probably talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. Anyway, those are some of the things that I personally want to see. but I want to take you to Allison Lucan. I think she's talking about similar things in her most recent write-up. Definitely has a little bit of a different perspective on some of the things, but I want to take you to her analysis. I value it, even if I don't always agree with it, or it's not what my eye test is immediately telling me, but it's worth talking about. And we're going to close the show having a discussion. And by that, I mean, I'm going to basically talk. But I want to introduce a discussion about player safety. Unfortunately, it's come up in a pretty tragic way in the hockey community. So I want to get into that. All of that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. If you hate waiting, Indeed's US data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find a quality candidate or candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they post a sponsored job. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and even virtual interviews. So I can tell you, as a business owner, I'm about to start hiring, and it can be really tough to find the right candidates. You're just kind of throwing ideas out there, and you want to get the right person, but you also want to get the person that you need in the right timeline. And finding all of those variables on your own, for me at least, has been daunting. So that's why we want to help you out. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. So with all of that said, we want you to visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/locked on, LOCKEDON. Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. But if you need to hire, you need Indeed. Thanks as always, Seattle hockey fans, for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Oh man, I have some thoughts about this team. I'm starting to settle into what we're looking like this year. That's the good news. But I also want to always push and thread the needle just a little bit more, because I think we can, and in some ways we must, be better. So as I mentioned, the amazing Allison Lucan has a welcome home posting up on kraken.com. And I just want to go over a few highlights. Now, if you are an everydayer, you know that I wanted at least 3 points out of a possible 8 on this past road trip. Well, the Seattle Kraken got me 5 points, and I love that. But here are some things that Allison sees as a strong suit. She talks about depth remaining a strength. And I talked about how in the past, I guess, was it yesterday's episode or the episode before, I didn't necessarily see this as a bullet point right away. I was kind of looking at the points that we have per line, and it's single digits. Let me see if I still have that page with me. Single digit points for our fourth line. Yep. As of the other day, 12 points for the top line, 11 and 10 respectively for the second and third line, and then just the 4 points at the time before the Tampa Bay game for the fourth line. 4 points for the fourth line. This was including the change of Oliver Bjorkstrand up to the top line. So that was something that I was looking at. But here's what Allison Lucan is talking about. On the road trip, so the 4-game road trip, Allison writes 16 different Kraken skaters earned at least 1 point, and 11 players were multi-point generators. And she talks about how this is important because you can't just focus on one line. You can't just focus on one player. I will relent, and I agree with Allison on that. I think that early on, the spread is different, and there's some players that we hope to see engaged, especially when it comes to scoring goals, that we have not. But I do think that this is a good point. New faces in good graces. And Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, we talk about Pierre-Edouard all the time. Great locker room presence, has really begun a renaissance, if you will, when it comes to the face-off dot. And is he the best face-off guy? Well, actually, I didn't pull the numbers. We'll have to talk about that on another episode. But by him just, it's kind of like that Mamba mentality, Kobe Bryant, where I do really think that Pierre-Edouard Bellemare loves the challenge of the face-off, the art of the face-off. And I've talked to him about this before. For the Locked On Kraken insiders, you probably heard that audio. I'll cycle it again. But yes, he indeed loves the art of the face-off. And so he definitely is a guy. Kyler Yamamoto, on yesterday's episode, you heard McCann giving him praise. I talked about how Dave Haxtell has been giving him praise. JT Brown really likes what he's doing. So I like that. Some other things that we have here, answering the call. One of the blemishes early in the season has been injuries. Brandon Tanev out. We just got him back, and Andrei Burakovsky once again out. And so answering the call, Ty Cartier, Devin Shore, and this is where I really think you should check this out. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see that I'm scrolling through, but if you're listening on audio, check the show notes, because Allison Lucan and the Seattle Kraken, they embedded the video of Devin Shore's first goal for the Seattle Kraken. Highly recommend. Highly recommend. Just a lot of fun. She also talks about special teams and the power play. Something I didn't realize, ended October with a 25% conversion rate on the power play, 8th in the league. We've been talking about how bad it was. I don't know, maybe is Dave Haxtell right? That the foibles of the power play have been greatly exaggerated. I don't know if I buy that just yet, but okay, these are the numbers. We'll go with that. Net gain. I love this. We talked about it on yesterday's episode, but 5 starts for each goaltender, a combined 911 save percentage in the last or on the last road trip. So I love that. And then talking about back end support and the pairings that we have and how they fare with other defenseman pairings in the NHL. Highly recommend this article from the amazing Allison Lucan. Before we get on to the conversation that I want to have about protecting players, not just neck protection, but overall protection for players, I want to get you ready for the upcoming Seattle Kraken schedule. Yesterday, I went over the specialty logos. But today, I want to talk about what we have coming up just in the first 2 weeks of November. We have the Nashville Predators coming into town tomorrow. Then we take on the Calgary Flames on Saturday, both at Climate Pledge Arena. I told you yesterday, I want to see us at 500 this year. I really want us to protect home ice. Then next week, we have 2 games on the road before coming back to host the Edmonton Oilers. But before we take on the Oilers, we go to the Mullet Arena, Arizona. Arizona's been not terrible. So we got to watch out for them. Then we take on Colorado again. That Colorado game, I feel like we didn't talk too much about the Colorado game. It was one of the games where I'm pretty sure I was traveling, just kind of came about at a weird time. I want to get into Colorado as an opponent. And then I mentioned on the 11th, which is next Saturday, we play the Oilers. So we've got a game Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday next week. We play the Oilers and the Avalanche twice this month. We play Vancouver. That's going to be a good matchup. Play Vancouver twice this month. I mentioned we play the Flames on Saturday. We have them twice this month. And then everyone else, or the other teams, I should say, that we have the Islanders struggling a little bit. The San Jose Sharks, yikes, still waiting for a win. So I guess we shouldn't complain. The Maple Leafs on the last day of the month. And then on the 28th, the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm going to try like the Dickens to get to that game. I'm going to keep you updated. I went through that's part of the reason why we're going over the schedule today. I went through my schedule and I have some games, not just NHL games though. I've got some games and we're going to talk about that. I'll give you a little bit of that on Friday's episode, but that's the schedule real quick. Want to keep it super clean. We're not going to do a deep dive. We got through deeper dives on the schedule earlier in the off season. We're going to go back to that because we really only went through, it was either January or February. I can't remember. Definitely January because we talked Winter Classic. Hello. But I think we have to pick up from February, March, April. So we'll do that once we get through probably closer to the end of year holiday season. Coming up next on Locked On Kraken, player safety. Player safety. I am not beholden to the culture of men's hockey. I'm not beholden to the culture of NHL hockey. And so I do think there are things that can and probably should be done sooner than later to keep players safe. We're going to talk about that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by the Sleeper app. A new NHL season brings so many new possibilities. Will Pierre-Edouard Bellemare score 50 goals? Probably not. Can the Seattle Kraken hoist the Stanley Cup? We've got some work to do. But none of that withstanding, you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy hockey app of the Locked On NHL network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in a daily fantasy hockey contest. You pick the players you like. Set yourself up to win 100x your money by knowing who you want. And it's daily. You don't have to be locked into a roster that you picked months ago at a Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever the case is. You can go day by day. And although it is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL network, you can also find NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, even I think I said yesterday Canadian football. I think it's college football. So I apologize for that. On the Sleeper app, there's a chat functionality. You can talk to groups of other people also using the Sleeper app. So to win big and 100x your original bet, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Kraken fans. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention to the Locked On NHL show, to Locked On Kraken, and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Cha-ching! Use promo code Locked On NHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that code Locked On NHL, also at the bottom of your screen. If you're not watching on YouTube, hi YouTubers, check your show notes. Everything's there for you. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Okay, hockey fans. It's always tough when you lose someone from the hockey community, when you lose someone from any community that you're a part of. But we're a part of a collective hockey community. I think it gets really tough when you feel like a death could have been preventable. And perhaps that's the conversation that some people want to have after the death of Adam Johnson, who died after his throat was slashed by a skate blade during a professional game in England. I mentioned this to the Locked On Kraken insiders. Jeff Baker has been following this story. He actually has 2 articles. I'm going to show you on the screen the one that I'm going to refer to on today's episode. But there's another one, and I recommend that you check that one out as well. Neck protection for NHL players won't happen overnight, but history suggests it will happen. And there's so many things that really frustrated me reading this article, including how long it has taken the NHL historically to make moves in the right direction. I'm sorry, I'm shifting through my notes. Here we go. I'm shifting through my notes because I was reading some of what Jeff put out and what other people put out. And unfortunately, deaths in professional sports or just in sports overall, they're not I don't want to say they're not uncommon. That seems like a stretch. They have happened. Baseball players have experienced it. And we're just talking deaths, not to mention really gnarly injuries that change rules. We've seen it in the NBA with closeouts. That was Kawhi Leonard, right, when he was with San Antonio. We've seen it in baseball with catchers and how they can protect the plate, and that they cannot guard the plate and block the plate until the ball is on its way. They have to have a clear path. These are all things that have changed in the last 10, maybe a little longer for baseball. I don't know, 10 years? Anyway, we've seen the NHL, and Jeff Baker outlines it in his article. They've changed the visor rule. And so technically all players are supposed to wear a visor, but just like all players are supposed to wear a helmet during warmups. Our very own Brandon Tanev got whacked in the face not wearing a helmet during warmups. Skating without a helmet, I mean, I've done it before. I'm not a hockey player, and it's a lot of fun. I have never skated without a helmet on ice while pucks have been being shot by professional hockey players. Anyway, I digress a little. Let's get back to what Jeff Baker is talking about here. He talks about, in his article, the reluctance for the NHL and hockey community to make changes stems in part because of hockey culture. He writes, not to mention, with hockey being a sport that sometimes obsessively preaches team over individual, some players simply don't want to stand out. This is a situation where a player doesn't want to be different. And that could be the reason that they don't protect themselves from something that could be fatal. That's just mind-blowing to me. And I've said this before, if you are an OGer, and I do mean an OGer, if you're watching on YouTube, comment on this. You might remember that I interviewed someone from women's pro hockey to Seattle. And I asked them about wearing a full cage or a visor bubble and thoughts on that. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I also talked about, I was a softball player before they mandated that we wear these cages. And I tell this gruesome story. You can listen to that episode, but just to speed it along, I hated those cages. I was like, I'm not doing that. It makes it really awkward if you're going to slide head first in particular. And I used to steal bases in my day. So, having something so heavy, getting used to that was really tough. And I was like, I don't want to do it. I'm not doing it. And this is even after I played in college and one of my teammates, high chin music, and the seams are very pronounced on a softball. And the movement of a softball is extremely different. It can actually move in more directions. I don't know if you want to know the physics. Anyway, the point is, pronounced seams coming in super fast, high and tight. My teammate just barely got out of the way, but not before the seams sliced her cheek. Blood gushing right away. Less than an inch. I'm talking a centimeter or two. If it hadn't hit the fleshy part, kind of where you use the blush, if you will, if it hadn't hit the fleshy part of her cheek, it was very close to her eye. Could have, I mean, I don't even want to think. And hockey is a sport where Willie O'Ree, right? Blind in one eye. We've had players, I learned from Jeff's article, I'll put it up again, played with two black eyes. And we, the collective we, historically, of hockey culture, has ridiculed people when they do things for their protection. Guys who break their jaw, broken jaw. You'll see them play a hockey game with a broken jaw in a bubble. And, I don't really like doing this. Well, alternatively, had you been wearing it before, maybe you wouldn't have broken your dang jaw. I've talked about this before. We see with the visors, sticks get stuck in there, pucks get stuck in there. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't understand. And it's not even universal. In the article, Jeff Baker compares Will Borgen to Vince Dunn and what they had to do growing up regarding neck visors in particular. But as I mentioned, Jeff had been talking to, obviously, Seattle Kraken players for this article. He also spoke to Dave Haxtell. I picked this up the other day. It wasn't germane to what we were discussing on the podcast, so I held it off. But here's Dave Haxtell before the Tampa Bay game talking, and he's a former college coach, remember. Here's what he had to say regarding neck protection in the National Hockey League, or just in hockey overall.
A lot of college hockey, coached in the NHL. Right? Why do you think players are so resistant to wearing neck protection?
Well, there's, technology is changing in the game, and I think, first and foremost on everybody's mind is the safety factor, from all sides of the game. In Adam's case, just a tragic accident, that, is extremely unfortunate. You can't even put it into words. That's not the right term even for it. But, as technology evolves, players continue to add effective forms of equipment to protect them, whether it's, in one area or another. So when the proper technology is there and readily available, players are making the steps to keep themselves as safe as they can in this game, which is, it's fast, it's hectic, and at times it's chaotic.
You saw what happened with Malarchuk back when you were still playing, I believe. The dates are right. What did you ever have? Did it ever cross your mind to wear a neck guard after that, or?
No, not at that point in time. There was, again, you can do different studies on the effectiveness of different protections. So, in that case, no, I did not.
So that was Dave Haxtell. Very quickly, Jeff Baker kind of walks him through the history of protection. I do like what Dave said regarding as the technology increases. And here's another thing. It's one thing that to effectively bully people when they were playing in Willie O'Ree's day, or, he mentioned another hockey player that I'm just not personally familiar with. And again, in Jeff Baker's article, he kind of walks through the different injuries that have happened. Not exhaustive. It's not an exhaustive list, but he walks through those. What we definitely know is that sticks used to be wood. There used to be no curve. There was no composite. Same thing on the baseball side. whether you're talking at Major League Baseball with wooden bats and definitely with composite bats, which is what I played with when I played in college. Those bats are made to create offense, just like hockey sticks are made to create offense, to make shooting the puck easier. A part of the way, or to score goals easier, a part of the way that you make scoring goals easier, a part of the way that you make hitting home runs or hitting a ball with distance easier is by making the puck be shot at a higher velocity, by making the exit velocity of a baseball or a softball greater. That means that in a sport where you are blocking a puck, where the equipment is now designed to make that puck leave your stick with more velocity, now you have human bodies blocking those pucks. Hockey math? Hockey math. Of course you need more protection. Now, the protection and the technology from equipment has also changed, so it's less cumbersome, and you see changes there as well. But I can't get with that at this day and age in arguably any sport, but especially sports like baseball, softball, and hockey, that you need less equipment. That's not the answer. Lighter equipment, sure, but less, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so in Jeff's piece, I highly recommend that you take a look at it. And that's what Dave Haxel is referring to. Is the technology going to catch up to the need? Keep players safe is a need. I think that's pretty top of the list. But the player resistance is in the bulkiness. And I cannot sit here. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't mention that I understand where players are coming from, because as a player, I thought the same thing. And then I saw a teammate get her face sliced. And even after I saw that, I didn't immediately say, nope, I was wrong. Let's get the cage. It takes time. I get that. But in a league where you, without hesitation, got rid of pride tape, I find it hard to comprehend why it's taken so long to implement other safety things. And the good Lord above help me. The solution for me on an equity point of view, because I mentioned I come from women's hockey, the answer is not for women's hockey players to go to visors or anything less than a full cage or a bubble. That is not the answer. That is not the solution, in my personal opinion. There should be a standard for safety, regardless of your gender and regardless of your age. And if anything, as you get stronger, as you're skating with stronger and faster and more experienced hockey players, I cannot for the life of me understand why you would wear less equipment. You know, race car drivers, their cars go a lot faster than any car I've certainly ever driven. They don't wear less when they're in the driver's seat. They wear more because the risk is higher. Those are my thoughts. There's another element of how the hockey community has reacted, unfortunately, to the player that was involved in whose skate cut Adam Johnson's. I'm not quite ready. Ooh, I just got a little emotional. I'm not quite ready to have that conversation yet. I didn't expect to get emotional like this. This was an accident. Like Dave Haxel said, tragic doesn't even begin to describe. the comments that the other player has been getting are heartbreaking and unfortunately are indicative of some of the worst of the human condition. I'm going to leave it there now because I'm not like I don't want to overshadow. I don't want to overlook it, I should say. But I'm personally not ready to go there right now. It's emotional enough to know that someone died playing hockey. So what I'll say is this, like I say every episode, be kind to yourself and be kind to one another. This is a game. This is a beautiful game that has given me so many opportunities. It's a physical game. It's a game where sometimes not always our greatest attributes are on display. It's a game that inevitably comes with failure. I don't think it's a game that has to inevitably lead to fatality. And it is definitely not a game that should make people susceptible and open to blatant racism. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. And we hold fast. We stay true. Tomorrow's a game day. You might see that I'm wearing the same thing on tomorrow's episode. That's because I'm batch recording today, baby. Probably might be wearing the same thing on Friday as well. We've got some good stuff coming. Thanks for going along on this journey. I did not expect to be emotional, but I do think these are important conversations to have in the hockey community. I'm so grateful for you listening to the show and just being who you are, a Kraken fan, a hockey fan, maybe just even a fan of this show. I'm grateful. And until we cross paths, take care of yourself, be well, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.